Thanks to World of Warships for sponsoring this video. The Kursk Disaster. Death on the Bottom of the Sea. When it was commissioned in 1994, the nuclear submarine K-141 Kursk was one of the most powerful assets of the Russian Navy. The size of two jumbo jets, it was considered impenetrable, indestructible, a predator lurking beneath the surface. In August 2000, for its crew, the mammoth attack sub became nothing more than a steel coffin lying on the bottom of the sea, with no way to escape. Kursk was designed to be a hunter, never a prey. With its mighty arsenal of cruise missiles and torpedoes, the submarine was designed specifically to destroy NATO aircraft carrier battle groups. August 10, 2000, Kursk joined the Summer X exercise in the Barents Sea, not far from the port of Murmansk. This was the first large-scale naval exercise in more than a decade. Beside some of the largest Russian vessels, such as the aircraft carrier Admiral Kuznetsov and battlecruiser Pyotr Velezhy, it included 30 ships, 4 attack submarines, and a flotilla of smaller vessels. Newly elected President Vladimir Putin was resolved to show the world his army was still one of the mightiest forces in the world. On the morning of August 12th, Kursk was tasked with attacking the Pyotr Velezhy battlecruiser with dummy torpedoes. As the Northern Fleet turned toward Kursk, the submarine remained silent. Everyone was expecting Kursk to emerge victoriously, but unbeknownst to them, the country's worst post-Soviet naval catastrophe was unfolding. It seemed unbelievable that a submarine like Kursk could have disappeared out of the blue. After all, Project 949A Anti, NATO codename Oscar II subs, were the largest cruise missile submarines in the world. Designed by the Soviet Union's Central Design Bureau, Rubin, Kursk's keel was laid in Severodvinsk port in 1992. Named in honor of Soviet victory in the legendary World War II battle, Kursk was launched in 1994, commissioned into the Russian Navy's Northern Fleet, and assigned to the 7th SSGN Division of the 1st Submarine Flotilla. Everything about Kursk was gigantic. 154 meters long and 18.2 meters wide, it displaced 24,000 tons when submerged. 2 nuclear reactors propelled the submarine, each with the power of 190 megawatts, along with 2 turbines delivering 49,000 horsepower each. Kursk was armed with 24 P-700 Granite cruise missiles, NATO codename Shipwreck. Besides Granite missiles, Kursk also carried 28 torpedoes, or anti-submarine missiles. The submarine had 10 watertight compartments and double-hull construction. Its outer hull was made of 8mm steel plates and covered by 8 centimeters of rubber. The inner hull was much more robust and built with high-quality 5cm steel plates. The construction was so strong, its designers claimed it could withstand a direct hit from a torpedo. When on August 12, 2000, Kursk sank, it happened in a fashion that neither the crew nor submarine constructors could have ever imagined. There hadn't been the slightest hint that morning that tragedy might happen. On the contrary, everyone aboard the K-141 Kursk was ready for action. The morale was high, with 118 personnel on board. The Kursk crew was awarded the title of Best Crew in the Northern Fleet. Their submarine was indestructible. There was nothing on Earth that could go wrong. As mentioned, the Summer X exercise was the first of its scale. Kursk was supposed to show what it was made for, to be a large vessel killer. The submarine joined the exercise on August 10. A massive shootout from all vessels took place that day. Kursk showed its muscles by launching a Granite cruising missile while submerged. 2 days later, the submarine commander, Captain First Rank Gennady Lyachin, prepared its vessel for another exercise task, attacking the Pyotr Velezhy cruiser. A dummy Type 65 kit torpedo was to be used for the job. These torpedoes were powerful enough to sink an aircraft carrier. That morning of August 12th, at 8:51 a.m., Captain Lyachin requested permission to start the torpedo training launch, which the HQ approved. Lyachin ordered his men to prepare the first of the 2 dummy torpedoes for launching. Kursk had its periscope lifted and had a target on sight. At 11:29 a.m., sailors at the torpedo compartment loaded the first torpedo into the number 4 tube on the starboard side. Back at the North Fleet HQ, staff overseeing the exercise were waiting for the confirmation of the hit, but received nothing but silence. However, the hydroacoustics at the Pyotr Velezhy detected something strange. They reported a signal similar to an underwater explosion. A few minutes later, the ship's entire hull shuddered, and the hydroacoustics detected a powerful signal. The Fleet HQ was immediately informed, but ignored the report as irrelevant. Before we unravel what happened at Summer X, here's a word from today's sponsor. World of Warships is a team-based sea battle video game available for free on PC. With over 44 million players, it's an incredibly interactive gameplay environment that allows you to not only use different strategies and tactics, but to also play with your friends in Division. This game features over 400 historical ships that you can steer through beautiful maps with unique living landscapes. But that's not all. You are in complete control of these ships and can customize them in any way you see fit. There are 5 classes: destroyers, battleships, cruisers, aircraft carriers, and submarines, each one having their own exclusive perks. Imagine with Godzilla as a commander of your ship, or Kong. Nobody is stopping you. What about the incredible characters from Azure Lane, or even battles against giant monsters from Big Hunt? When you download World of Warships through the link below and use the code FIRE when registering, you can enjoy a huge starter pack, 200 doubloons, 1 million credits, a Tier 5 USS Texas, 20 Restless Fire Camouflage, and 7 days of a premium account. Now that is a steal. Now go check out World of Warships and battle among your friends. For the next 2 hours, that firing exercise was planned to last. No one wondered if anything strange happened to the Kursk. There was no report about the course of exercise from the submarine, not even a single message. Only at 13:30, when the scheduled exercise time expired, Fleet Commander Admiral Vyacheslav Alexeyevich Popov aboard the Pyotr Velezhy sent a helicopter to locate Kursk, but with no result. Finally, when Kursk didn't appear on the surface 45 minutes after the exercise was over, the Fleet Commander began to suspect something had happened. In the upcoming hours, Kursk failed to send a scheduled communication check. That was a signal to look for the submarine. At 17:30, Fleet's search and rescue team was given a standby order. The North Fleet commander sent reconnaissance aircraft to search. Half an hour before midnight, the Northern Fleet declared an emergency alert connected to an accident on a nuclear submarine, K-141, Kursk. The exercise was stopped, and all vessels searched for the missing Leviathan throughout the night. Locating a sunk submarine should not be difficult, considering they were equipped with emergency rescue buoys. In case of any kind of emergency, these buoys would be activated automatically and float to the surface, signaling nearby ships about the vessel's location in danger. The problem with Kursk was that the buoy was nowhere to be found. Luckily, at 4:50 a.m. on August 13, Pyotr Velezhy's Echo sounder detected 2 seafloor anomalies. Rescue ship Mikhail Rudnitsky arrived at the location carrying 2 deep submergence rescue vehicles called DSRVs. The inspection of the seabed at the site began at 10 a.m. At 18:30, one DSRV hit an unidentified object and urgently surfaced. Just before the vehicle started rising to the surface, rescuers saw propellers and the stern stabilizer of a submarine. Kursk was found. The vessel was lying on a seabed at a depth of 108 meters, listing at a 25-degree angle and down 5 to 7 degrees by the bow. Footage from a deep-water camera showed the boat severely damaged from the bow to its sail. Now a struggle began to attach DSRVs to an escape hatch at the 9th compartment. Judging by the scale of the damage, there was little chance that anyone survived the accident. But if there were survivors, the 9th compartment would surely be their place to wait for rescue. For 6 days, Russian DSRVs contested harsh weather attempting to dock to the escape hatch. Unfortunately, the Russians failed to do so each time they approached the sub. The rescue hatch was so damaged that it made the task impossible. A number of foreign countries offered Russia help in rescuing the sailors, but the government in Moscow refused them all. In the meantime, Russian authorities tried to cover up the accident. On August 13, Northern Fleet Commander Admiral Vyacheslav Popov disregarded that Kursk was missing and presented the exercise as a complete success. However, rumors of something going wrong reached the families of sailors. They gathered at the Northern Fleet HQ, demanding answers. Finally, on August 14th, Popov gave in and informed the public that the Kursk had minor technical difficulties and had been forced to descend to the seabed. He lied, though, that communication was established with the sailors inside and that they delivered the oxygen and electricity to them via special links. The truth was, all the attempts to reach the potential survivors had failed. On August 17, 5 days after the accident, President Vladimir Putin finally accepted foreign offers for help. 2 days later, the Norwegian ships Norman Pioneer and Seaway Eagle arrived, along with the British rescue sub LR-5. The Norwegian divers immediately got to work, but Russian authorities denied them access to the escape hatch. The Russians feared that foreign divers could gather intelligence about their submarine. The Norwegians strongly protested. All of their efforts would be futile if they could not work on the submarine hull. They ultimately reached a compromise. Norwegian divers were allowed to open the boat, but only Russian divers could enter it. On August 21st, 9 days after the sinking, Norwegian divers cut the holes in the submarine hull with the help of a special high-velocity water-cutting machine. The Russian divers entered the sub through the 8th compartment. In the 9th, the rearmost compartment, they found the lifeless bodies of 23 sailors. These had been the last survivors of the Kursk. A message found in the pocket of Captain Lieutenant Dmitry Kolesnikov revealed the final hours of their lives. I am writing blindly. The time is 13:15. All personnel from Section 6, 7, and 8 have moved to Section 9. There are 23 people here. We made this decision because none of us can escape. It's too dark to write here, but I'll try. It looks like we have no chance, maybe 10 to 20%. I hope that someday someone will read this. Don't despair. The sailors lived for some time after the accident before they were left out of oxygen. A later investigation discovered that they accidentally ignited one of the oxygen regeneration canisters. As a result, the last drops of oxygen that kept them alive were consumed by fire. On the same day that divers entered the submarine, the Chief of Staff of the Russian Northern Fleet, Vice Admiral Mikhail Motsak, announced to the public that none of the 118 sailors aboard the Kursk had survived the accident. Northern Fleet Commander Admiral Vyacheslav Popov asked the families of the killed sailors for forgiveness. But the victims' families were furious. Not even President Putin and his address could stop the rage of those who lost loved ones.
I feel pain. I feel ashamed of our president, our government, the admirals. The top brass only came here on the 6th day. Those bastards in power, they keep lying to the people.
Families were unsatisfied with how the Navy handled the rescue operation, how they treated them, and after all, they demanded to know how their loved ones were killed. Already on August 14, the Russian authorities came up with a scenario of what happened to Kursk. Fleet Admiral Vladimir Kuroyedov claimed that the sinking of the submarine resulted from a collision with a NATO submarine. The Russians knew NATO subs were shadowing the exercise. They claimed that either USS Memphis or USS Toledo or even the British HMS Splendid had entered the restricted area, collided with Kursk, and sent it to the bottom of the sea. For a moment, it seemed as if the Cold War had revived. The U.S. Secretary of State rejected the claims, assuring the Russians and the world that such a scenario did not happen, but also that it was impossible. First of all, it was unlikely that USS Memphis, with a displacement of less than half of Kursk's, could have damaged Kursk without suffering at least the same level of damage itself. Besides, Kursk was designed to withstand the hit of the torpedo, so a collision with another, smaller submarine would not cause such severe damage. Seismic measurements picked up by a station in Norway during the exercise also showed something else. They detected an initial seismic event in the area where the exercise was being held at 11:29 and 34 seconds. Then, at 11:31 and 48 seconds, they recorded a second event similar to the first one, but 250 times larger. Both measured shock waves were typical for torpedo blasts. So, was it a torpedo that sank the Kursk? If a NATO submarine didn't collide with Kursk, was it possible that the Americans sank the Russian submarine with a torpedo? The official report released by the Russian government brought clarity in July of 2002. It was a torpedo that sank Kursk, but not one from a NATO submarine. It wasn't from a friendly sub either. Kursk was sunk by its own torpedo. The Type 6576A kit torpedo that Kursk was armed with was a modified 650mm torpedo from the early 1970s. It was designed to attack and destroy American aircraft carriers, large submarines, and merchant vessels. It was a powerful torpedo, with a drawback that rendered it extremely dangerous for use. Type 65 torpedoes were fueled with hydrogen peroxide. Being an oxidizer, hydrogen peroxide combined with kerosene made a powerful fuel that gave Type 65 torpedoes a range of up to 100 kilometers. The problem with hydrogen peroxide is that it is extremely unstable when in direct contact with catalysts such as copper or bronze. Such contacts may cause spontaneous combustion. That was exactly what happened with Kursk. A dummy torpedo that was to be used for practice had a faulty weld that allowed the hydrogen peroxide to leak out and react with copper and bronze elements on the torpedo. The torpedo burst into flames, causing the explosion of 1,000 kilograms of concentrated hydrogen peroxide and 500 kilograms of kerosene. The resulting fire in the torpedo section set off a second explosion of 5 to 7 combat-ready torpedoes, each with 450-kilogram warheads. This second explosion blew off the entire bow, killing most of the crew and sending the Kursk to the bottom of the sea. The blast was so powerful, the seismic stations in Alaska, 4,500 kilometers away, registered it. The first explosion should have been contained by the bulkhead between the first and second compartment if a pressurized valve in the ventilation system had been closed, but the valve was left open, allowing the fire to spread to the fourth compartment, instantly killing everyone in the control room, radio room, and quarters. That explains why no distress signal was sent from the submarine. As for the emergency rescue buoy, its failure was credited to a mission taking place 1 year prior. At the time, Kursk was shadowing U.S. Navy ships. Fearing that the buoy might reveal their presence, it was intentionally disabled but then never put back to work. Luckily, the fifth compartment where nuclear reactors were located resisted the explosion. As a result, both reactors shut down automatically, avoiding an even bigger catastrophe. Sailors who loaded dummy torpedoes in the submarine did notice fuel was seeping through a faulty weld. Junior officers to whom they reported the incident took no action as they were busy preparing the vessels for the exercise. If only they had followed the strict procedure for preparing the torpedo, the tragedy would have probably been avoided. Along with the issue of hydrogen peroxide leaking, the official government report emphasized stunning breaches of discipline, shoddy, obsolete, and poorly maintained equipment, as well as negligence, incompetence, and mismanagement as reasons for the tragedy. Despite the accusation brought in the official report, the prosecutor general filed no charges. Instead, he stated that a technical malfunction of the torpedo caused the accident. Needless to say, the decision infuriated the families of the killed sailors. They knew their loved ones died because of someone's negligence, and yet no one was going to pay for it. In October to November 2000, divers recovered 12 bodies from the submarine. The rest of them remained trapped inside Kursk for another year. In October 2001, 14 months after the accident, the Dutch company Mammoth raised Kursk from the seafloor and transferred it to the Roslyakovo shipyard in Murmansk. Inside the wreckage were the bodies of the Kursk crew, 118 brave men paid the ultimate price for serving their country, even when the country failed to take proper care of them. If you found this story of the Kursk disaster interesting, please like this video. Don't forget that if you use the code FIRE when registering for World of Warships, you get access to all of the features shown on the screen. Be sure to check it out. Subscribe to see when my next documentary is up. Until then, you can take a look at this episode of Dark History.